Yeah, everyone. So welcome to the special EDC episode of Three Pillars Podcast. And a quick disclaimer, the opinions on this podcast are those of the individuals themselves and do not reflect the views of the companies those individuals represent. And so we have our very first guest on the show outside of the three of us. We have Ben Kvalo from Midwest Games. So thanks for joining us, Ben.
Happy to be here. Really excited to be here.
Yeah, I know. So I guess first question, you're at Game Developer Conference, San Francisco. What number is this for you? How many has it been?
I've been coming since 2012, but not every year, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think this is like number anywhere between 6 or 8. You just lose track at some point, right?
Yeah, seriously, right. I know. So it's been you've been here a couple of days now. Yeah. What's like first impressions of this year? What's like talk of the town? What like you kind of looking for? What's it felt like?
It's felt like reunion for me. So the funny thing about this one is that it's like a full circle type moment, because last year at this time I was still at Netflix and I was like just starting to talk about this idea that I had to create a company. And this was a good moment to like check it with people and to be like, hey, is this a good idea? Am I being stupid? Like,
right.
It's like, should I do this? Should I leave the stable job?
Right.
And go do this really wild idea. And so it was a really like coming back to it now, and like suddenly we have a brand, we're funded. Like it like brings me back like, holy crap, that was like a year ago. And yeah, so it's a kind of a full circle, but there's like talk wise, it's all about, obviously AI is just everything. It's one way or another, good, bad, everything in between. And so that's good. I think it's good that there's not as much like Web3, sponsorships this year as there was last year. They pretty much like ruled everything last year. And so it's funny to see that every year, like there's something that's like here, and then the next year it's like non-existent.
Yeah. Right.
Almost every year. Yeah. It's funny.
I know, right? Yeah. What about Kawabe-san, Thomas? Any predictions for next year?
For next year,
call it right now. March 23rd, 2025. Yeah. It's going to be
2025. Yeah, I know this year is AI, right? Maybe AI part 2. Perhaps.
Yeah, it's not going away. That's
right. Yeah. Deepening. Maybe it's moving from because. I think that the last year or so, it's been more generative AI. So creating things from scratch, and people are realizing like, yeah, it works. You iterate on it a few times. Maybe that fills in some basic plan. But yeah, maybe it's like some more intuitive models. Or I know I've heard it's like everyone seems to be on the cusp of, does my company build its own LLM, like large language model or do we build on top of something like Google Gemini? Just 1.5 just came out. I know we're looking at that versus like ChatGPT or something else. Yeah. So yeah, but
next year I'll be curious to see if there's like some new model, like new business model that starts to take off.
Right.
With the amount of studios that are being created in this moment, post layoffs and whatnot.
Seriously,
I'm curious to see if there's like something that takes hold, or a new platform or a new engine or something that like takes hold of the industry and like just grows out of, seemingly nothing. And then also the biggest problem that we're going to face is being able to cut through the noise. If there's already on Steam 14,000 games coming out every year, I think that's within a year or two, that's going to be like 20,000. And then the talk is going to be like, well, who's going to come up with something that allows you to like break through the noise?
So regarding the new platform or new engine, I think so in the game industry, we are working on the 3D graphic, right? So 3D graphic engine is dominated right now. But I think that after the AI, maybe we don't really need to create a polygon model at all, because the AI can generate anything from the, just, text to the, game. What do you think?
No. I think they make sense. I think maybe also in rigging and so on and so forth. I think we already do 3D scans sometimes of real objects. So I think using AI to make it instantly an object in games, I think it's something that will happen.
So I think NVIDIA was some kind of the robot. They tried to create some AI-based game, but currently they create something like firstly, they need to create something on the Unreal Engine, and then the AI run the Unreal Engine model, then they create some game from that.
So it's like
So the game engine will be the AI generated one, I think. Yeah.
oh, okay. Oh, so it's like an engine.
So no need to do the 3D graphic or something.
Oh. Do you think that opens up then like who is going to make games even more? Because maybe some people, like maybe people today are still a bit shy about like, game development, even the word development is kind of people are like, ooh, that sounds like something I didn't study in school. So maybe I don't touch that. But
yeah, I think the next wave is all around accessibility. We are going to have more types of people able to make games in many different ways than I think we've ever seen. So it's going to be a welcoming of people into this industry. And then it's a whole more wave of new games at different levels. You know, some people are going to be doing it, you know, in the Fortnite, you know, editor, and some people are going to be doing it in Roblox. But that is, you know, almost like an educational level of development because you're getting into it, you know, like game jams, you know, getting people into it for the first time. They try it, they go through it, you know, they work on it, they go to the next level, and, you know, eventually they're, you know, have a studio and are actually developing a lot of like high quality games. And so people are going to be very accessible to everything that we have and all these tools like anyone can use. Like me, like I'm an operations business side, like marketing, but you know, that's getting to the point that someone like me can, if I have a good idea around some kind of game, I can actually get it stood up and at least pitch. Like, because I think the biggest thing that AI is doing right now is it's taking all that concepting work and making it instant. And then for me, as developers are like pitching towards us as a publisher, they can actually like show a visual or a video of what they want the game to look like, which helps them better sell it to me to invest in that game.
I think for the prototyping phase, it's really, you know, the AI is help us a lot. So creating some gray box or anything like that. So we can just, you know, try many things as much as possible with the AI generated game. So software engineering, maybe they lost their job because, you know, everyone can just, you know, texting is enough for the creating the game. So we don't need to, you know, really using the C plus or C plus plus or something like that.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, so it's more like the people that are building for there being more games available might do pretty well, but then the way those games are made could be really disrupted.
So recently people say like a low coding or about no coding is the next. Right?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, but it kind of brings it back to like, as you say, gaming, it will be more accessible and it will be much easier to create, but at the same time, it'll be much more difficult to stand out or like, how are you going to let people know that your game exists? So I think maybe that's where AI can also be a push of like, hey, I like these kind of games, recommend me the next one, or like create some sort of algorithm that way might be interesting in the future.
Curation.
More curated.
I think, you know, having come from Netflix where they're probably one of the best curators, like delivering the exact content you want, when you want it, like they're the best at it. None of it's ever perfect. Like there's no way to make a perfect system unless you like have it attached to your brain in some way. Like,
we'll get there.
We'll get there.
There's some people working on that, I'm sure. Yeah. Next GDC, we'll all just sit in a room, not use our mouths to talk. Just look at each other blankly.
Sharing thoughts. Well, sometimes we're doing that at GDC.
That's right. Usually by Thursday this week, you're staring blankly anyway.
So probably after like the parties or typically.
Oh, my goodness. 8 a.m. tomorrow. Yep. staring blankly at breakfast.
But I think that there's the curation problem. Like, so I think what's interesting is obviously AI is going to affect jobs, like it's going to, but it also is going to create opportunities and new jobs and new things because like maximizing that, like, you know, UA wasn't a thing for a long time until it became one because of like free to play mobile and like the growth in those areas, and it suddenly created a whole different grouping of jobs that never kind of existed, you know, compared to what was happening in the 90s when it was just, you know, a really kind of a premium sales models. And so I think it will just create a whole new wave of, okay, well, maybe there's a business that specifically knows how to make something stand out, and there's going to be so much movement in that space. And also some of the legal things happening, at least in the US, the lawsuits between Epic and Google and Apple and whatnot. And so like web stores and like these other marketplaces and what's going to be interesting is, as much as like Apple's controlled things for so long, what's fascinating is, okay, if that starts to branch apart, like it's both good and bad for the consumer because it also creates like so many different places they could go.
Right.
And it becomes like just such a confusing ecosystem. Whereas right now it's really simple. You go to one place.
Yeah.
But if that starts to break apart, like that's going to create a lot of opportunities, a lot of jobs, like, and how do you get them to come to your service and all that? And it's, like the streaming wars, like again, me coming from Netflix, seeing like, well, what service are you going to, subscribe to?
Yeah.
Like, who are you a member of? How many do you have? All this stuff. I think we're about to hit that in the games end as well.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, I'm curious with from your time at Netflix, like going through then coming out the other side. Because also at Twitch, I remember back in like 2015, 16, they had Facebook Live, you had Mixer from Xbox, and it was kind of like I think our approach was like, okay, like weather the storm and like see if they last. Was that well? What did it feel like at Netflix? Yeah, okay.
That's what you feel like. You're like, wait. Well, Netflix is the only profitable streamer, so it's like already an advantage. We had been doing it for 10 years before all of these other companies came on. And the reality is, you hear about some of the mergers between some of them and like, that they're going through the churn. They're learning all the lessons that Netflix learned 10 years ago. Right. And so a bunch of them are going to fail. Like that's just the reality. And then whoever survives are going to be the 3, 4, 5 of services that exist, and then everyone else is going to sell content to those services. And so I think we're about to go through it the same way, and like Game Pass and Netflix Games has their game service, and there's others that are coming into that marketplace. And the minute like cloud becomes a viable solution, because it's just not scalable or viable or economical right now, but the minute it does, we're going to have a whole like streaming games war of people trying to come in and do that. And then, there's going to be a lot of winners on the outside just being the content providers that's to the highest bidder. Think about like Spider-Man. Like, Sony decided not to go into, the streaming wars, but instead sold to the highest bidder, which is why when Spider-Man leaves theaters, it goes to Netflix first before it then eventually goes to Disney. But it's like they've been able to cadence it, and like Netflix probably pays a ton of money for that. Yeah. And they still have Disney that pays tons of money.
It's almost like flips the equation to the power of the content provider because they're taking advantage of all the competition and the muddying on the other side.
So maybe it's good for the IP holders because we have so many.
I think you're absolutely right. IP is going to be so valuable because that's ultimately where you're going to sell to the highest bidder. You can continue to build it over time. That's what we're doing is investing in IP. Like with every one of our games we sign, we're investing a minority share of the IP with the game. We want the creators to have control over it because we think that if a creator has control, they're going to do the best with it. And then we're there to support and help it grow.
Got it. Yeah. How about like from the Capcom angle in Japan? Like how does like Capcom, or how do you notice Japanese companies thinking about like IP rights and distribution? Like is it kind of similar to this in the US, or is there any different way that it works today?
I'd say pretty similar. I think we're very protective of our IP, much more than I think US companies. So we really look over it very, very closely, see what other people do with our IP if we work together with them. But I think when it comes to like selling more IP to highest bidders, I think that's quite similar, or how we choose our partnerships. Of course, you always talk to many different parties at the same time and then choose what works best for you. So, and because we have such strong IP, we're always able to, we don't sometimes have to sell it. People come to us rather, which is put us in a very strong position.
We talk to the Google for the Stadia, and Amazon Luna, and also the Netflix and then Facebook. Because of that, we have the really good IP.
So it's kind of then that's like a hard example of what we're talking about, where it's like you have all these platforms. I remember that's when we worked together when I was at Amazon. It's also like it's like trying to build this platform that's more like just behind the Amazon name, but then how do you fill with IP to differentiate to the end customer? Are you guys noticing any like, so, Ben, you mentioned like there, especially from the Google and Apple court case rulings, like probably more web shops, probably more places for people to distribute games. Are any kind of standing out to you, or like what type of like channels do you see popping up?
I mean, not a ton yet. A lot of that's still being settled, but there's all the rumors you hear of these different platforms that are gonna pop up and whatnot. And Steam has ruled PC for a long time.
Yeah.
And it's very rare that it just lasts forever, right? And it's but they've done a great job at what they do, how they deliver things. And so they just haven't had that competitor. But at some point you got to believe that there's gonna be somebody that figures out another way to do it. And so that's a marketplace and a growing marketplace, right? We saw PC grow from 2022 to 2023, whereas mobile actually went down as a percentage of the overall pie for the first time in a long time.
Yeah.
And so PC continues to see this steady pace of things, which is really interesting.
Yeah, I wonder, is that like the more like work from home or like work remote trends when people are just in home and you're on your computer more?
Yeah.
I actually know, just like offhand, like, oh yeah, I also have been playing more PC games and mobile games the last couple of years. That was my personal preference anyway, but yeah.
Well, and consoles grew too. So it's kind of just interesting to see like what is that signaling, right? Or is it signaling something, or is it just an off year? We'll see going like into next year. Like, does that trend continue? Because that's going to be a worrying trend for anyone that's in that kind of free to play mobile space. Already, it's a really, really, really tough space.
Yeah.
And then with subscription models coming to mobile, I think subscriptions are going to disrupt mobile first the most, because you could either have this free to play, which you're going to end up spending a ton of money, or you get a full game as part of a subscription service on your mobile, and already like it's a higher quality premium experience suddenly on mobile because mobile devices can now handle that. Like, which would you prefer to play? And my belief is they'd prefer to play the premium game if they had the choice, which is that we haven't always had that choice up until now, but I think it's starting to change.
So you mean like you feel like because there's things like Apple Arcade today where you can get bunch of premium games, access to them every month on your iPhone or your Apple devices, but I feel like there's going to be a lot more mirror programs of that in the next couple of years.
Yeah, like Netflix Games is doing it. Maybe I might just be biased because of that coming, so I'll be very transparent with that. But I just don't think Apple Arcade did anything with it. They haven't done anything with it. Like, they could have done so much more, but Apple cares about devices. Like, that's really what it comes down to. And now that there's more content providers that are going in the space that are just care about the content, but could use that kind of model to build it. Like, I've heard rumors of certain companies going into that space. And again, like, the consumer makes the decision. And I just believe that if the consumer would be given these two options, would rather do something that they're really not paying anything additional for. They might already, like Netflix, they already have the subscription. You're not paying anything more, and you suddenly have a bunch of games. So like, why not? And high quality. I think they're launching Hades like tomorrow or something like that.
Oh, great!
Which is right?
I've been waiting for it.
They launched GTA 3, like the remaster. Like, the fact that you could just have Netflix and then be able to do that. I think that a bunch of other services are going to do some of the same kind of stuff. And then, am I going to do that, or like play Candy Crush? Like, it's just, I think a lot more people are going to start choosing that. We've just never had that option before.
Yeah, it's very anecdotal, but I never used to game on mobile because I didn't like the free-to-play model. But since Netflix started doing it, I really started gaming on mobile as well, all the Netflix titles.
Oh, really? So that was like kind of your gateway to now.
Yeah, because as been mentioned, I just I never had the option, or like, if it's free to play, I'm scared I might spend too much, but I know, hey, this is just part of an existing subscription anyway, and I'm not going to spend anything additionally. So
Well, and you get great game. Like one
Yeah,
of the
and-
first ones that I like advocated to get on was Into the Breach, and it's
Yeah,
because it
I
was one of
got-
my favorite PC games.
yeah.
And the fact that I could play a fully fledged PC game on mobile, and that
Yeah.
game was, you know, basically
Yeah.
in so many ways built for mobile. Like it's perfect for
Yeah,
handheld
yeah.
play.
It was a
You do
good pick.
quick 5 minute, like
Mm.
it's just a perfect game for that. I was like, oh wow, like this it's eye opening because I also am not like a big mobile
Mhm.
player. It'll just be interesting to see what will casual audiences that are more like the free play, will they convert over to it? And that's what I don't know. I'm too biased in the core, like hardcore game space.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see if those are the ones that actually do start to play these premium games.
Yeah. I know. Does the subscription model carry over to Japan? Like, are people used to that as a way to buy content or play games?
For gaming,
I don't know, but I think the Game Pass
Mhm.
is a little successful even in Japan, but I don't know.
Yeah, for mobile gaming, we're also not the experts when it
No.
comes to mobile gaming in Japan, of course, given our background.
Maybe we are core game.
Yeah, we're core gamers, yeah. I think this is just my perception, so I might be completely off, but I feel for Japanese companies, it makes much more sense to do like the gacha because it's just so profitable for them instead of going over to subscriptions. So it's better to have people, you know,
Yeah.
get that rare item and so on and so forth.
I think you bring up a great point. Subscription has a ceiling.
Yeah.
And what the benefit of these other models is there is
Yeah.
no ceiling. Like you can have this just enormous game come from like, you know, humble beginnings.
Mhm.
And so it's going to be a trade-off. But I also think considering like how our industry, you know, is lacking sustainability right now, like maybe that trade-off is worth it because it could create more sustainable studios and publishers by having it rather than just the boom or bust type model,
Yeah,
which is what, you know, kind of that free to play
Mhm.
model really is.
Yeah.
No, that's true. Maybe change gears a little bit. So then, so it sounds like, the business of games, there's a lot happening and potentially in distribution, these different programs where people can play games, moving more power back to the IP holders. How about like from like the culture of games? So obviously, you publish your Midwest games, it's branded Midwest. Like how would you describe like the game culture, either in development and people making games in the Midwest or just like people playing games in the Midwest? Like how would you differentiate it from like other parts of the US or other countries?
Well, I mean, the players are just consumers. They will consume whatever their favorite thing. It doesn't matter where it comes from. Like, they are consumers of content. And frankly, what I see in the Midwest is a lot of love for anime and a lot of love of things that come from elsewhere. Not the Midwest, not the US. And so there's a large influence. And even with the game developers, I see the influence in the art style and in the kind of game that they're making. And so there's a large influence from elsewhere that is definitely not Midwest. But then there's also the Midwest games as well and other games that are influenced by, certain cultures and whatnot. And so I see that. But then, from an overall like culture standpoint in the Midwest, it's an interesting and different kind of place. I think the game developers there's like this idea of scarcity. Like, in a place that has scarcity, people become really efficient or smart about the resources that they do have, and they become really good at whatever that thing is. I'm a big fan of Dune. And so like the Fremen in Dune are a perfect example of that.
Yeah.
Like they become so good at survival in the worst of the worst conditions that they became the greatest warriors in the entire universe. And so it's that like idea, and maybe that's a dramatic analogy compared to game developers, but in the same
feels like
way,
that way
like
sometimes.
in the same way, when you you're not getting a lot of funding, you're not getting a lot of support. The developers that actually survive in that environment and continue to put out games, like they're really, really, really talented, and you just give them a little bit of support and a little bit of backing, and they can do things that folks in San Francisco, LA, Seattle, Austin, don't do, not because they couldn't, but because they don't have to. They don't have to think about it like that. They can get, millions of dollars of funding. They can get a
I see what
publishing
you mean.
deal. They know the people, they know the industry, they know that. And so just by us coming in and trying to infuse some of that in, we're seeing that there's tremendous talent there. They just need opportunity. And I think that's going to actually take them further because they're building the studios in a smart way, an efficient way, a sustainable way, which is going to help our industry.
So it's almost more like maybe hard work, grit. There's like other cultural or like working values versus like, some of like the larger cities maybe you've grown up or gotten used to, especially in the last 10 years in tech and games, like lots of support, lots of resources.
Like the blue collar mentality to white collar work. Like, just putting in a hard day's work, getting a fair wage, like being fair with the people around it. Like it's funny, like in Wisconsin, I was on a local Wisconsin public radio. And right before I went on, there was a segment about how this person really loved living in this town, but they had outgrown their house. And so they made a bunch of rules because they wanted to stay nearby. They had to be walkable, all that stuff. And so they found a house. This older couple were selling their house. And the guy had to convince this couple to pay them more money and make it a fair deal because the old couple just were like really happy to have another family coming into the house that they had. And so he wasn't trying to take advantage of it. In fact, he was trying to pay them more, even though they would sell it for less because he felt it was fair. And so the idea of being fair and just, that exists in a major way, and not trying to take advantage of a good deal, like actually trying to work with the people around you to do what's good for everybody.
Sounds a little familiar. I know we've talked about the cultural differences in Japan between Tokyo and Osaka before. What do you guys think about that? Like, I know we talked before about like Osaka being maybe more of like blue collar work ethic or background versus Tokyo maybe a bit more like
white collar. That's
like,
indeed similar, I think. So that way, or like what Ben mentioned, like it kind of reminds me of Sampoyoshi, what they call
Sampoyoshi.
Yeah, so that's like Omi is the region where it comes from, right? I think, Anyway, there's this town.
Somewhere there's a
Sorry, I'm still jet lagged, so I'm not sure if I can recall correctly.
Post lunch,
Sampoyoshi is basically make a win-win for everyone, right? For all parties involved. So I think the story you mentioned with the house, like just to give back to the community, you want everyone to kind of get better from the deal. So instead of abusing that or making sure that you get more, make sure that everyone gets the most, which I felt very similar. Yeah.
I know even like myself, so I grew up in Palm Springs, which is a couple hours east of LA. And I think people notice like it's a pretty nice tourist town or like place to visit, which you should come, especially in the winter. It's really nice. But yeah, I mean, generally it's a lot of working class families outside of the really nice hotels in like a very small part of the...
And all the billionaires that live there.
They have their seventh house up on the hill over there. Yeah, and I could like wave to it. Yeah, and then, I went to college in LA, and I think to me that was like, it's only a couple hours by car, pretty close, but it's like very culturally, it's quite different in the values. Yeah, it's just like, it's crazy how like, even a state like California, just like, an hour or even like 30, 40 minutes by car can be like such a stark difference in like how people live and different values. But like even in...
LA versus Orange County, like you talk about like, even politically, like two polar opposites, like in there, it's 30, 45 minutes.
Yeah, seriously, if that. So one thing, I know partly why I started working in tech was I thought it was a great equalizer because it's, if you know how to code or, you can, put up a website, it's like, that's something literally anyone in the world can build from anywhere in the world as long as you have internet and a laptop or a phone.
Right.
And so I think games are kind of an extension of that. And so, probably we're going to see bigger, more disruptions coming from places that like we're not talking about today.
Yeah, definitely.
So it'd be fun. Yeah, have you noticed, I've probably done some travel since we're all here in San Francisco, but has anyone noticed like certain regions popping up that maybe weren't really in the conversation a few years ago for game development, where it's like, oh, now actually are kind of been hearing more and more about people investing there or more developers?
No, I think, well, I recently went to Indonesia for some market research, but that's actually a pretty strong region when it comes to development as well. There's this famous indie studio, Toge Productions. They make like Coffee Talk, which is pretty big. And, just from the people that I saw developing there as well, very high quality things that they made, as well as like, for example, sometimes the art is very Japanese inspired as well, but like there are very, very many good artists in Japan as well, but even it's like no difference in quality, or sometimes like very high quality of things as well. So I think that's probably a region that I'm looking forward to, or like invested in seeing how that grows further. Yeah. I don't know. What about you, Okabe-san?
I don't know, but so probably that this is kind of off topics, but in the game industry, so the market wise, it's still growing, right? But the publisher or developer, the number of publisher or developer is still increasing or decreasing or stay still, or do you know like the trend right now?
Yeah, trend number of developers is massively increasing.
Okay.
But the publishers are pretty steady. There's only like 200 worldwide. And so there's not a lot of publishers, which is why like supply demand, like publishers are in a huge advantage because they have the money. And there's only so many of them, and you're competing against so many others. It's kind of like trying to get hired in this environment right now.
Right.
Okay.
Like, there's so many people out there that it's, I put up a community manager role, and we got 2,000 applicants in 2 days. And my brand's not even that like big or famous, like, but and so I can't imagine some of the larger brands that have it. And so it's the studios. There's just so many, and now with the layoffs, there's only going to be more as well. And then for me, what I'm seeing is we're getting some good submissions from Taiwan. We're getting some good submissions from Mexico, Brazil. Africa also, I think, is a really interesting growing spot that not enough are investing in. But I've heard there's a new publisher as well. I'm forgetting the name of it, that's focused just on publishing in Africa. And so I think we're going to start to see a lot of those kinds of regions pop out. Again, accessibility for developers and tools, like anyone, anywhere can make it.
Yeah.
It's just really more so about actually going and finding it, supporting the ecosystem, having events that like indie devs can come to and show off their game and talk and like learn from one another or collaborate, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, what's been the best way for you to find games that you're looking for today?
I'm in a unique position that my LinkedIn blew up, and so I have a lot of developers that reach out to me on LinkedIn. And so LinkedIn's a great one to connect with people. You can literally very directly connect with the people in each of these different companies, and you can build a network, and so that's a really good way. But events are always a good place to meet somebody and see game-wise. The other spots, probably, Twitter, has been historically such, it's a little bit toxic right now. And so Twitter's an interesting one. We'll see how that develops and changes over time. Mine has been LinkedIn, but I know that it's still an echo chamber a little bit. And so you're only getting a certain portion of developers. Like a lot of folks that are thinking about the business end are going on LinkedIn, but there's plenty of developers that aren't. And so we've seen it at local events. So we've just gone to a lot of local events, found a lot of great developers at those events, but you can only do so much of that, right? Like I only have so much time and like so travel and whatnot. So I try to really emphasize any of the local ones in the Midwest. And then I try to hit the ones that I can that are larger. But again, the smaller developers that are in random places, they can't afford to go to GDC. Like any of these bigger events. And so those ones are still being missed.
Yeah, definitely.
But so yesterday we met some indie game developer, and then we discussed a little bit about their games, and then that developer said that he is looking for the publisher for that game. But but I don't know why they need a publisher, because recently the Steam or any platform, anyone can publish their games.
I just go back to the data. Like on Steam, as much as everyone can now self-publish, the data shows if you do that, you are like likely to fail. 98% of games on Steam are self-published. And they generate about, and the data's changing, so it might be a little bit off, but it's about 25% of total revenue on Steam. So like 75% by 2%, which are the publishers. And so getting a publisher puts you in the 75% category compared to others. So yeah, you can still win as a self-published. There are routes.
Yeah.
It's just, I just come back to the more support you have outside of your expertise, the better off you are, because a publisher adds marketing, community. You might do community yourself, but you probably haven't done paid marketing campaigns before or asset development or some of that. You probably don't have a PR agency that knows IGN or knows some of these bigger press outlets. You probably don't know the platforms. You don't work with the platforms all the time. You don't have an account rep. Like, each of these platforms have account reps and whatnot, and publishers have those. And individual developers, unless you've had success, don't have those. And so all of that, and then plus localization. Like individual studios don't have good localization pipelines, best practices. And we know localization is so key to having a globally accessible game. Quality assurance, they don't always think about that. They kind of do it themselves and like find the bugs they can. But when you have to scale that and have enough testing and everything like that. And then just thinking about, a lot of these indie devs, they don't have a lot of the practices. They don't go through it enough that they have good production pipeline like practices and sticking to milestones and understanding like all the complexities of bringing to multiple platforms and the porting costs associated with that as well. Whereas, a publisher has those connections in to the point that, you go to the ID at Xbox program, they have a whole program that will pay for the port of your game. And so, so as much as, like you can self-publish and there are absolutely those routes, it's all those other factors. And any one of them could be the reason something succeeds. Maybe it's a localization in Russian that makes something go off because, the Russian market likes that game. And so it could be any of those. And considering the amount of games, you want to have as many levers as possible to be able to use. Otherwise, you're taking a lottery ticket. And you could win, but most people lose.
Like if you poured in years making this thing, wouldn't you rather, like instead of starting over again, like make sure it gives it the best shot in the sun?
The other thing I always say is 100% of zero is still zero.
True.
But I think that even Capcom, we really struggle to, releasing the new IP because the same thing, like even we have the connection to the, IGN or any sort of things, but the new IP is tough, even for us.
Incredible.
Yeah, it's hard to make people care about it.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah.
Like care. Yeah, and expectations.
Yeah,
right? You have to set expectations the right way, and anything that comes from Capcom, like you have high expectations. Whereas when I put out something early access, indie, there isn't like high expectation. I'm not going to get critiqued it like that, and so you have to match kind of that, which is an interesting balancing act.
Yeah, I think that's especially coming from like a bigger publisher or like someone with some name value attached to it. People are very easy to call you out of like, oh, these greedy publishers just want to make money. But of course, we have to make money, but sometimes it's not the intention to like. Sometimes you just put out a statement or put something out there, not expecting it to get such a negative reaction. But sometimes it's just how people take it. You never really thought about it that way. But it's a difficult balancing act for sure.
Yeah, that's true. I know what's like. I mean, listen, there's so many things like a game has to do. It's like, are they thinking about PR? Are they thinking about localization? What's like? Do you see like a really common mistake that indies do when they're self-publishing? Or like what's the biggest thing that's missing when they're self-publishing that like, it's like maybe there's a gap there that, say, if someone was starting a new publisher or like wanted to help indies more on the business or marketing side, that was like, you should definitely start there. There's a huge gap.
Well, know the platform you're launching on well, know how it operates, know its algorithm as much as you can, do the research around that, launch in the right way, the best optimized way. But then marketing matters. Like marketing puts you above and beyond the mass of everything else, and marketing's dollars matter. And so that's a big piece. I think the other thing, it's just developers don't always think about the business end of it and kind of the value that they're building a really valuable, like every game that comes out, if you successfully release a game, you suddenly have IP and it has value. Like, and no matter how successful it is, it actually is, it is of value, and you have to be careful with that. Don't sell 100% of your IP to somebody else, because you then have no control over that moving forward. Now, we believe in like minority, like where we acquire like minority share, but it's okay to also ask for that you keep the 100%. Some publishers will say no at that point, and some will say yes. And so understanding the business of things, but yeah, for the self-publishers out there, marketing matters, building your community matters. Like, and I think a lot of them understand the community part, Discord and you know, a lot of those areas, and some of them do really, really well at that. That still doesn't guarantee you your success ultimately when you come to market. And so that's a lot of the mistakes are kind of in those areas of not understanding marketing and then not understanding the platform.
Yeah, I know in some of the devs we've talked to, it seems like there's almost like this chronological order to success, especially if you're self-publishing, where it seems like, or at least I've heard from more than one, that it's like they try, like to your point about marketing, to set themselves apart, try to differentiate on TikTok first. Then from that, you are like sending people to a Discord or wish list. I forget which is in what order. And then from there, you're able to do a Kickstarter, maybe try to raise funds yourself. That's actually like a later stage thing. Yeah. How do you, yeah.
I Kickstarter is a whole.
I know. Yeah.
It's just you. So what I'm not the biggest fan of Kickstarter for the developer's sake, because you're essentially doing all of this marketing work to just get these dollars in, but then you owe them all. Like ultimately promises are made and you have to deliver upon those. So instead of you focusing on developing the game, you're trying to deliver upon all these promises, which takes away from your ability to develop the game, which means the game's not going to be as good, and so you're probably not going to deliver upon the promises.
Promises. I mean, like, oh, if you're a $50 donor, you get a interview, half hour with me every month or something.
We're
like
gonna
that.
add your name in the game, like that stuff. Does that really like make the game better? Like the fact that, you know, because somebody has a lot of money and they gave it to you, now their name, like the main character is named after them. Does that make the game better? I don't know.
Can you name any game like successful for the crowdfunding type development style game?
I think Undertale was.
Undertale.
Yeah, but that was funded on Kickstarter, I think. Yeah. Wasn't there also, didn't Platinum Games also do something on Kickstarter? Wasn't it Wonderful 101 port? I think they kickstarted that too. Yeah. Not sure if that was successful or not, but
yeah.
One what, BattleTech was it? I believe it's called BattleTech under Hairbrained Schemes.
The crowdfunding game is still popular in US.
I think the trend has kind of died down because there were as you mentioned, it's complex and like
and
a lot of people
returns and people are getting burned because a lot of the audiences that were investing and saying, hey, I want to help you, they then didn't get what they were promised, and then they're like, I'm never doing that again.
Because then the game's never finished.
So like never finished.
Publisher or developer. Yeah, seriously. Wow.
Okay.
Yeah, but the kind of what I'm interested is to hear more about as well is like, say I'm an indie developer and I want to strike a deal with the publisher. What is it what you're looking for in an indie? Like, what do you look at? What is like the ideal pitch?
Ideal pitch.
Yeah.
I mean,
sorry. Can I ask the how do you guys define the indie game?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
There is no one factor in my eyes. I look at anything, you know. Anything that's under $1 million is for sure indie.
Oh yeah, under $1 million.
Like if you look at the dollar amounts, like so anything really like under 10 million, I consider it could be indie. 10 to 50 is like AA. Anything above 50 is absolutely AAA. So that's one factor, and there's some that don't fit into those categories and outside of it. I also look at, you know, does the team have like backing or not? Like, are they like they're bootstrapping it, or they are, you know, really like, you know, somewhat funded, but like outside of a big company. That's another way to look at it. But again, there's exceptions to those rules as well. And so that's at least my take.
Yeah. I wonder if, we're talking about what's going to happen at future GDCs. Maybe the like categorization or more like how people identify themselves. I feel like that might branch out because indie, in my head, I'm like thinking more team size. And then I'm like, wait, well, that's not necessarily true because you can have a 10-person team asking for $50 million or like extra play and everything. So I'm like, well, yeah, it's such a wide swath of the industry right now. It's probably like 90-something% of developers are indie.
I saw a 40-person team that was asking for like less than 300,000. So,
Really?
So and it depends on where they are, like where they are, and the situation, because there's in the indie space, like there's so many other ways to fund. I talked with a developer that they work in insurance and that's what they do. And then they work on the game on the side. And so,
that's a lot of people, right?
Yeah.
Like
so, so they're like how much something costs is hard to really measure, right?
Yeah, it's almost like indie and game developer. I feel like are almost synonymous now. It's like you start out as indie, and then you can maybe if you go work somewhere, you have something else. It becomes a different thing, but it's basically that's people's default. And there's nothing that is kind of the future of the industry. So
well, I mean, if you don't have support and you're doing a lot of it yourself, I'd say that's really what indie is all about, right?
Yeah.
Like you are taking the risk. Like it's a risk proposition. You're taking the risk, and you're out on an island. You either survive or you don't survive.
Yeah.
But God damn it, it's your island.
Definitely.
I'll be here. They're my coconuts. That's my boat. Oh,
yeah.
Like Castaway. There we go.
Yeah, I know. Oh, I need to rewatch that one. Yeah. Maybe plane ride home. But I know. One thing thinking about too, right? Like there's more and more like venture capitalist VC investors in games now too, where if you go back like 20 years, maybe it was publishers were the investors other than a couple angels, and that now you have like these kind of, they're not game publishers, although maybe they're pseudo getting into publishing just to offer more services. Like as a publisher, how do you think about VCs or like more institutional investors?
VCs are a fascinating kind of thing because really it's like the last 6 years or so that they've really heavily come into this space. I love that games are getting more ways to get funding. Like that's awesome. The problem that VCs have, not all of them, some of them are thinking about it, I think, the right ways, is they aren't trained in the way to like operate game development and the milestones and checking in and the support services that like a publisher provides. Like that's part of the value is being able to help the studio along, get them what they need when they need it, get them to think about the thing 5 steps ahead before they ever get to there.
Yeah, right.
And VCs just, and it's okay. It's not a fault of theirs, but they're not trained in that way because that's not what their expertise is.
Maybe we should be the consultant for the VC.
Yeah, perhaps.
Yeah.
That's absolutely right. I think it's going to evolve. I think there's going to be different approaches to how VCs are, and some are doing it differently as well.
We have to open a new division for that.
Oh, you heard it here first, everybody.
You're heavily planning,
What I think VCs should be doing is they should invest in a publisher and a number of developers, and then have that publisher both do their business and service their internal ones. Like that is where I see them like succeeding, because otherwise they're just investing in developers, and then that developer, when it goes to go to market, it needs a publisher anyway, and then that they're giving up 50% of the revenue, which means that's not going back to that to that investment anyways. And so might as well have somebody that's going to handle that for you. And so that's one of my bigger issues with it. But it is a really interesting space because they see the value. They see this giant industry that is 7 times bigger than the film industry. It's bigger than music, TV, and film combined times 2. And they see, and then they invested in it. In fact, they probably over-invested in it too quickly during the COVID, which is part of the problem of like post-COVID.
Right.
And what if they just did it more sustainably, like continue investing in larger ways, but think about how the industry works and how the cycles work. Even how their investment cycles work are very different compared to how games development works and our timelines of like 18 months at the very least, like to years and years and years, whereas they want a lot of VCs want to see a developer exit or sell their company within 10 years. And a lot of game developers don't go into game development to sell their company.
No.
So like it seems like a contradiction in that way. So there has to be a different way to do it. But it's good that they're in it. They're learning. Hopefully they're learning lessons and adapting. But overall, like I'm glad that there is more investment because more great games are getting funded. But then we also have so many games. So like but hopefully they get more support. And that's why I'm an advocate of, okay, if they're going to do that, also invest in a publisher that will help all of their portfolio studios.
Oh, that makes sense.
Do you think hypothetically that that model of VC investing in publisher alongside studios, is that something Midwest would be open to, or do you work with any VCs today?
Yeah, we have 2 VCs on our cap table, both of them in the region in Wisconsin. Titletown Tech and Brightstar, and so we have some VC cash, and then as we look into the future, and if we raise money again, like that is absolutely something that we'll explore, but we'll want that like strong, like someone that's thinking strategic about it, like wants us there for a reason to be a centerpiece of being able to support a lot of what the other things that they're doing are, because that's beneficial for all around. We're able to then, get access to game developers that were so good that they got VC funding, and then we're helping them come to market while also still being able to do everything else on the other side of our business outside of that. And it just creates value, like kind of all around, and more efficiency. Like I'm being in operations, like, it's about, a lot of it's about efficiency, and that's creates and opens avenues to better efficiency.
Yeah, but still, I don't know how the VC company that works. How can they make money from the funding, because most of the game is not really, even they don't launch, right? And even the game, the founded game was launched, maybe it's still not like profitable, right? So how they can make money from the investing the indie game?
It's really around like the whole, they need like 1 out of 10 to succeed, because they're hunting for the unicorn.
Yes,
the game, game, or the developer that creates the game that's $1 billion game. And then that pays for every other one of their, investments ultimately. And so that's one way. Each VC operates differently. Metrics. So like that's probably a very generalized statement. VC would probably be like, Ben, that's not how we work.
No, it is. I mean, it's general investment principle, because even you can go back to, say, Warren Buffett, right, the American investor. He made a lot of the lion's share of his money early from Geico Insurance. So one investment got him and his partners funding to then go and make a lot of others. And so it's the same with, like, forget which firm it was, but folks that made like early investments in Facebook or in Amazon, because then the value of the companies went up like 100, 1,000, 10,000x, and so that you only need like, I think it's more like 1 in 100 to hit that model. And but then the part, I don't know so much if it's a problem, but I think naturally then, investors or people look and say, oh yeah, wow, so they invested in 50 and Facebook was a big hit, and so they made all that, they made the money, and the fund's been around since then. So then they're like, okay, like let me just copy paste that formula and apply it to games, which I think is proving harder now, just because, I mean, it's an art form also, right? So a lot of people, it's not like you're investing only in like software service companies that are out there to solve problems for customers. Like when you're building entertainment, it's different economics and different meaning and purpose behind.
Well, they saw the tech part of games and they're like, oh, like I understand
this
is
tech.
I'm not thinking about, like, games is such a cross-functional, like cross-departmental, like type of exercise. Like it's not about just one thing within it. And VCs, it's not like they have like large investments in the entertainment space.
Right.
And so, it's just a very different beast that they're trying to tackle with games. But yeah, it has this whole technology and they should probably be investing in the technology behind games. Like that part seems like a really great investment from a VC. But game studios is it's an odd, like I think to your point, like just taking one system and moving out the games doesn't work. But I mean, just like anything, you try it and they'll iterate on it. And then some VCs are going to do it very differently and adapt and probably become called something else, right? Whatever it is, some hybrid of things. And that will ultimately propel a whole new wave of different types of investment. But I think it's overall like, they raise like a VC will raise like $80-100 million spread it across 30, 40, 50 or more companies. Again, they need one. And then if they have that one, then they become, that's the VC. Funded whatever, funded whoever.
Discovered whoever.
And then suddenly they get a lot of higher quality startups and, established founders that want to come do that. And that's, a lot of what their model is.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah, and you also have like governments and cities and countries kind of following suit.
Yeah.
They've always GDC, some of the games I saw yesterday from the Swiss Foundation, maybe the Flemish, or I know where Gamescom is, Germany every year in Cologne. They also have like really trying to get people to move there, not just come for the convention, but also base their game studios there. And so I feel like generally government's probably like a lagging indicator or like is something that happens later.
Yeah.
And so but I mean, the fact that it's happening now, it's like, there is like a lot of trying to prop up game development. So
yeah, I've noticed that in many European countries, like as of late, or I think actually 2 years ago in October, like the European government decided like we need to invest more in games because they saw, as we discussed yesterday a little bit as well, but you have lots of talent. You had lots of talent in Europe, but since all the big players were like in US, everyone just moves to these big companies or like moves to the big tech companies. So they really noticed, oh damn, we're losing a lot of like human capital here. So right now they're trying to recorrect and invest a lot from government spending as well to make sure that they can create like more of a tech ecosystem in Europe as well.
It's like brain drain.
Yeah, brain drain basically. Yeah, so we'll see how it goes with all these investments over the next couple of years.
Yeah, I mean we're looking at some of that kind of stuff, and we're based in Wisconsin, and we're trying to get a 30% tax incentive. Huge differentiator between us and other states that's specific for video games. There's a lot of tax incentives in the US that are for film, but then video games sometimes like sneaks their way. But not a lot for specifically video games. And so trying to get that, through in Wisconsin. But we've seen it. Like we get, even though we're Midwest games, like we're getting like recruited from like Spain and like Northern Ireland and like others to like come there and build an office there. And I'm like, well, I'm not sure that's what we're doing.
Yeah.
But
the Atlantic Games.
Right. It's fascinating.
What is the 30% tax incentive? I don't know about the.
So it would be 30% for each of your employees. So basically, per head count, it would be 30% cheaper that you'd get as a rebate of sorts.
30% of their compensation per employee? Oh.
Yeah. It's a very, very beneficial.
Oh, that happens for film now in the US?
Yep. Theirs are a little bit differently depending on like each state is a little bit structured differently, but there's a number of states have incentives like that.
And Wisconsin is one of them?
Wisconsin's used to have a film tax one, but they got burned pretty badly by Hollywood because what films does is they go into a place, they film it, and then they leave. And so what we've had to say, to Wisconsin is like, we know you got burned by the films industry, but games are here to stay. We're not going anywhere. We
just don't want to move to LA.
We hunkered down. We're right in the state. We're going to be in the state. We're going to develop in the state. We're going to bring money. And why that's valuable is average salary of a game developer in the U.S. is $123,000 a year. Compared to in Wisconsin, the average salary is like $60,000 a year. And so it's a dramatic difference. So for every games job that exists, it creates 4 other jobs in the state from other industries. And so that's incredibly valuable. And so that's part of why there's that push I think a lot of other people are seeing that very similar data in their regions. And so they can bring in kind of this. And it's like, again, to the cross functional nature of games, it brings in professionals from all different areas. And that's holistically good for an ecosystem because what happens is like Wisconsin's a very manufacturing focused and farming and some more traditional industries. And when you bring in some folks that are used to solving complex problems in different areas, and then ask them to, well, how do we make manufacturing better here? Or how do we improve some of our farming here? And you have people that are used to problem solving, critical thinking. It brings in more new ideas, even for traditional industries, gamification, financial technology. Healthcare is a huge thing, huge industry in Wisconsin. A lot of major healthcare is based out of there as well. And so if you have people that are solving problems in games that has to work in with different perspectives, that helps those industries.
That's interesting. I mean, we've talked a bit about that in like Osaka and the kind of like business culture there. Like there's a few kind of classic video game companies that have been there for a long time, but it's also like what like compared to the other traditional industries there is there like, do you feel like over time like video games, how's like video games help shape the economy or like the business environment in Osaka? Is it tangible even, or do you feel like you've seen it like be affected by people coming there for video games or like working in video games, or is it maybe too small of a part of the
That is a
business
very good
environment?
question. Yeah.
In Kansai, we have the big game company. It's called Nintendo.
Might have heard of that. Yeah.
That's the red one, right?
Yeah.
So people coming from the overseas, they really want to get higher than Nintendo's. So I had so many foreigners, they want to have the job in Nintendo. So yeah, so it kind of affect the environment, but
Yeah.
what you can say?
Yeah, no, it's a very difficult question to answer, I feel. 'Cause I know, for example, Capcom is also one of the bigger ones
of course,
in
yeah.
Osaka. So
Yeah.
I definitely think it has an influence. But yeah, I wonder. Yeah, it's difficult. I never really felt it. It wasn't that tangible for me, at least. Or I think.
But I think in Osaka or Kansai area, so there are many game developers, but most of them they're influenced by the Capcom or Nintendo, but mainly Capcom. So many ex-Capcom people, they start their own video game companies. That's
like
why,
Yeah.
So it's kind of like
I can say that almost every game developer in Kansai area is like ex-Capcom.
Oh, really interesting. Yeah.
I mean, I think it speaks to whenever there's one big success, what games does is it creates a lot of like seeds that can turn into, trees that grow around it. But you need that big success. So that's what we're trying to do in Wisconsin. Like you need one to grow into something bigger and it creates a lot of opportunities. I think we've seen it in kind of the Nordic regions, in Helsinki, in Stockholm, like you've seen a couple big companies come up and then suddenly there's a lot of talent that was there that suddenly actually gets either inspired or they work for that company and then they go create their own company. And so that's all you need is that one big company that allows so much else to flourish in a region.
Yeah, no, I think when you mentioned the example of the Nordics, I've heard that before as well, where they had like success after success after success because they share the knowledge and it's like everyone helps each other out, so that builds more successes.
Well, but the talent was always there,
right?
It's just the opportunity wasn't. And so for a long time, like a lot of career in games and before that, you never thought about the Nordic region being this huge gaming hub, but then under the surface, there's all this talent that was either doing different things or was doing games but not getting supported. And that's what my belief of my whole company is let's go to places and actually give them a chance to succeed. And throughout the world, we've seen any place you go and you legitimately invest in it it almost always succeeds and grows into something. I mean, Epic Games built in Raleigh, North Carolina, that's not was not considered a games hub, and they made it because they invested in it and they decided to not do what everyone else was doing, go to Seattle, San Francisco, LA, or Austin. And so there's a lot of opportunity to do that throughout the world. But you have to actually legitimately invest in it and build the overall ecosystem, because you need strong developers, and you need publishing, you need all these services, localization services, QA services, all of these things around it, and events and things that will attract people from the outside. All of those things work well together.
Yeah. I know. Wait, what said there was a conference that's starting, or what is the biggest one in the region right now? Is there like an event we should all be going to? Or?
As a game developer, you should be going to MDev, which is in Madison, in November. And it is a much more affordable, smaller GDC. And it allows for a lot of people that can't afford to come to San Francisco for GDC to be right in the middle, just north of it's about 3 hours from Chicago. So fairly close to Chicago, about 3 hours from Minneapolis, so close to that. Ann Arbor, Detroit, Columbus, Cincinnati, Indianapolis, Des Moines are all right around it. Milwaukee as well. And so that's one that's really good from a game development lens. From a consumer lens, there's a show called the Midwest Gaming Classic that is in Milwaukee, and it has 41,000 people that attend it. So a pretty decent sized show. It's a lot of classic games that are working to add more, a few newer games, indie games, some of that. So they have a very large audience. There's GDEX in Columbus, Ohio, that happens in October. And so they have a fairly large audience as well. So yeah, there's a number of different events. Some of the Chicago events have kind of died down. Chicago used to be such a big hub with Midway, obviously like Mortal Kombat, NBA Jam, like Cruising USA, like a lot of like arcade classics came from that. And that actually used to be a manufacturing company, like talking about change. It was a manufacturing company that then got into games, because they ported over, why am I forgetting the name? They ported over a huge game. I'm forgetting it.
What was it like?
Maybe we know.
It's a fighting game, shooting game, driving game.
Like one of the most famous.
Although I'm horrible at game trivia. I'm bluffing. Please don't ask me. Yeah. I do remember Midway. I've seen it.
Midway.
I was playing as a kid.
The ones you mentioned. They're were
Cruising USA.
Yeah, Cruising USA.
Yeah. How have curious how have the other podcasts been? I know you've been featured on a few, right?
Yeah. It's been good. It's I like podcasts. It's way more my style compared to like really
it's like hang out. Yeah.
I'm like too off the cuff at times. That the podcasts are great for that.
Yeah.
But when I have talking points, my ADHD, I'm just like I get lost.
Yeah. You like completely stick to it.
Yeah.
I know. I was debating. Like, I think GC sent you like just some random questions that we put together. But yeah, it's like so we only just started this one like a couple months ago, and so we're like still kind of learning a bit about the format. Yeah. So I think we just like to sit down and talk. That's great. Kind of like let it go through all these different topics. Yeah. So. Yeah. But
But just starting something new is just fun, right?
Yeah.
It is. Yeah. No, it's good. It's no, thanks for having me. It's
no, thank you.
It's always fun to just talk about these things, because you never know, like getting different perspectives and different thoughts around it, and and then sharing it with an audience, because like so much of this stuff is just not shared. Like that's part of what I'm trying to do with my company is ultimately be like, how do we be more transparent? How do we like share what publishing is all about? Because publishing is not like, as much as people can go school for games, but it's mainly game development. Like, what school does games publishing education?
I feel like maybe that's something University of Wisconsin-Madison should pick up. Yeah. I've got at least one professor on the books. Yeah. Yeah, seriously. I know, because there's like the game schools, like what? I mean, I'm going to be like DigiPen or like Full Sail or then it's like it's usually design or like one specific thing. It's not like the business. Or,
do a great job of laying out the publishing business, the pros, the cons, what to avoid, how to set up, how to do your pitches. And there's stuff online, obviously, and you can find stuff. I posted something on my LinkedIn, what I found, like somebody that I thought did a really good job of laying out what the development and how to find a publisher, how to lay out your pitch, all that kind of stuff. But it's just not well educated. And that's a huge challenge when a developer goes to try to actually, either try to get it published or try to put out their game. They're just not well educated around that part of it. They're really well educated around the game development piece of it, but this is not like a single, skill set. Like even in game development, right? Like it's like, you might be really great at coding, but you might not be good at art.
Right.
And so, you have to have that. And then you have this whole other element outside of the game that are also, you need to understand. It's just really complex, which again is why self-publishing is so difficult.
Okay. So I have the, very, very basic question for you guys. Like, why people playing the video game? Why?
That's a good question. I think it's wish fulfillment, I guess, right? You kind of want to get those experiences that you can get in your daily life, but you want to get those through video games. Like, I want to be a cool warrior, I want to live in a fancy world, kind of like that.
I want to power wash my
exactly. Seriously.
Power. Can't do that in daily life.
Yeah.
Do you have any opinion? Like,
for me, from personal, I'd say it's progression. Like I was always drawn to like games like World of Warcraft or something where I'm achieving more levels and like improving and getting better. So I think what draws me in is I feel like it's a way I'm like constantly getting better. Maybe it's a little bit of a competitive edge too, because then the better you are, you can take it out on other people.
Right.
Well, for me personally, like I like solving puzzles, and I'm like a systems thinker. Like goes into even my work. Like like I'm like managing resources all day, and so what do? I go home and I like do like a colony simulation resource management. It's like,
okay.
We're going according to plan. We can relax. Manage this colony of people that all hate each other. Like, but I think holistically, like what, like there's infinite reasons, right? Ultimately, I want to say fun.
Yeah.
But there's plenty of games that I would not consider fun that people love. Like, play a lot of it. I think it ultimately fulfills an interactive need to do it that a film or TV doesn't do just passively. Being able to engage in something, and I think people want to engage in something, and games gives you that with whatever you want to engage with.
So
how about you yourself?
In my opinion, and then it's really hard to speak in English because I'm much more fluent in Japanese.
I'm here for you.
Thomas is right.
ゲームをディレクターしてた時に、なんでゲームってみんなするんだろうっていうのを一回深く考えてみたんですね。で、それで私の一つの答え、これは正解不正解はないと思うんですけど、一つの考え方として、人生、普通のリアルライフですよね。人生とゲームがあるじゃないですか。で、人生とゲームの違いで、私は普通の人生、リアルな人生でクソゲーなわけですよ。多くの人にとって。評価、どんだけ頑張っても評価されないし、どんだけ頑張ってもお金、なんですかね、サラリーが増えないとか、評価が、ゲームの、いいゲームと悪いゲームの違いって私は、クソゲーは評価がちゃんとできてないゲームはクソゲーだと思うんです。要はリワードの仕組みがちゃんとできてないゲームがクソゲーだと思ってるんで、ゲームって大体リワードがうまくできてるんですよ。なので、ミッションにトライしたりとか、トライした後、やったーって思うとかっていうのはリワードの仕組みがうまく働いてるからで、人生はリワードの仕組みがうまく働いてないわけですよ。なので、リアルな人生を生きてると、ゲームをしてよりちゃんと褒めてもらえる、リワードの設計がちゃんとできてる世界っていうものに、没頭できるっていうのがゲームのいいところなのかなと思ってるので、リワードの仕組みっていうのは大切だなと思って、そこをうまく作るっていうのがゲームの一番コアな要素になってる て思ってますっていうのが私の一つの答え。
かっこよくですね。Yeah, so when Okabe-san was working as a director, he had was thinking very deeply as well about why do people play games, and of course one of the answers that he found, of course there's no right or wrong in this case, but is this, real life can sometimes not be as rewarding as we would like it to be, or sometimes you work really hard but it's not really appreciated, or you don't get the proper reward, or hey, I worked my ass off and my salary didn't increase by that much, or things like that. But good games, they have a good reward system in place, so if you put in the proper work, you get a good reward for that as well, which is where people kind of feel more valuable or feel rewarded much more than they sometimes do in real life, which is why they play video games.
Yeah.
Get your just rewards. That's in English.
Yeah.
It's what you were owed, or what you feel like you deserved, maybe.
なので多くのクソゲーはリワードの仕組みがうまくいってないゲームはだいたいクソゲーだっていうのはね、そういうとこかなと。
Yeah, and so basically bad games, they don't have that reward system properly figured out, so that's why they don't feel as fun to play as well. Yeah. I think you definitely have a point, the because I read a lot about building companies and creating good ecosystem in your company, and I feel like the most successful companies are the ones that are able to incentivize employees to do the right thing, or to react how they want to react. So I think it makes a lot of sense to given that good loop of doing something, getting properly rewarded for it. So I think it makes a lot of sense to me, at least. I don't know how you guys feel about it.
Yeah, I mean, even we just put out a game called Duck Paradox, and it is a roguelike platformer. It's all around ducks. So I like to call it Duck Souls because it's really
That's good.
Really,
so let's get that tattooed.
Really difficult, but it's really rewarding.
Right.
If you put in the time, you just have these moments because you basically are. There's a lot of puns here. You're basically this young woman named Dr. Paradox, and she actually sends her duck into a multiverse, and she has to go in after it, but then she finds evil versions of her duck that are attacking her. So you then get to the point where there's hundreds of ducks, but you can because she's a scientist, she's been able to slow down time and but you just have these moments that you do these in just wild things because you become so good at it, and that becomes that rewarding moment. So people that stream it and whatnot love it because it engages their audience. It feels when you actually accomplish that, it feels good, and it feels like you have that progression because you go from really, really bad at the start, and you actually feel yourself progress. And I think to that point, any game that you feel yourself getting better at it feels good because you're I can take on the world now. I think that's why Dark Souls, Elden Ring, all that did so well because they did very clearly they're not hiding behind the fact that it's really difficult, but the minute you start investing and get better, wow, that feels good.
Yeah.
And then suddenly people are playing their guitar and beating it.
Or when I play any of my friends playing Street Fighter and I just get totally destroyed because they'll just totally combo lock me and they'll go get a cup of coffee and their character is still beating me up and they're not even there anymore. I'm sure they feel great.
Must be nice for them.
Yeah.
So anyway, but thanks for coming by today, man.
Yeah, thank you.
Fun to get to know you in the Midwest.
It's a fun conversation.
Yeah.
So I think that wraps up the our first day of GDC, and then we'll be back at the end of the week to see if we still have our voices and how we're all feeling and what we learned. So
yeah. I'm still enjoying the GDC, but
we'll check in at the end and see how much.
I'll write that down. I'll write down. We'll be in this room all week, so I'll write it down somewhere. Cool. Yeah.
Awesome.
Thanks, guys. So,
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Hey everyone, we hope you enjoyed this week's episode of the Three Pillars podcast by Conduit and Capcom. As always, if you have any feedback, please email us at podcast@conduit.gg or join the Discord and let us know in the chat. You can find that on our website, conduit.gg. Arigatou gozaimasu, and we'll see you next time.